Ah, trios. You love them. Whether you're getting chilies with the boys, in need of some luck, or you're listening to your favorite alternative bands from the 90s, trios are a foundational piece of our great society. Last year, I made a video covering some of the best hitting duos of all time in honor of two teams meeting my qualification for a dynamic duo in the same season for the first time since 1969. One of those teams, the Los Angeles Dodgers, added Shohei Ohtani this past offseason. So I might as well get out in front of this and cover some of the best hitting trios of all time, and see what the Dodgers triumvirate needs to do in order to be the best. Now, for our chart, I did have to alter my search criteria a bit. For duos, I looked at every team that had two players post a 160 OPS plus or above. We established that reaching this number is an automatic ticket to stardom, and because of how OPS plus works, it is bound to happen only 4 to 6 times per year. So the chances that a team employs 3 such players is near impossible. Hell, it's only happened twice, and we'll be going over both of those teams. So to get a better overall view of the trio's landscape, and to not make our chart look like the dust on your screen, I reduced the cutoff to 145, which, hey, is nothing to scoff at either. The last player to win an MVP posting an OPS plus below this number was Dustin Pedroia all the way back in 2008. You will also notice each graphic has a scoring probability number in the middle here. This was developed by my friend Dren, and it's a way of calculating the probability that a pitcher is giving up a run while facing just these 3 one time through in a vacuum. If you ask him, it's not perfect, but this is a concept I've always been fascinated by when it comes to summing up the quick order firepower of a fearsome trio. And I'm amazed by the ingenuity he used to create an engine that's able to spit out these numbers. So we'll be using this to compare these troikas to each other. I've sequenced them based on the most common lineup configuration that season. Hey all, before we move on, let's quickly talk about Rival Fantasy and one of my favorite things to do on the platform now. As someone who goes to a ton of baseball games, I want to find a way to spice things up a bit. So every time me and my friends go to a game, we'll do a best ball daily draft, where we only pick players from the game that we're going to. They have leagues starting at $3 and going all the way up to $100. It's a fun way to incentivize you to basically be tuned into literally every at-bat. Instead of, oh, there's Todd Gonzalez, the 4th outfielder for X team. It's, hey, there's Todd Gonzalez. That's the guy I picked to click tonight. It's a great way to flex your knowledge of the game, about your knowledge of matchups, and it's just another great way to add friendly competition while you're watching the game. If you want to try this out for yourself, go to rivalfantasy.com, sign up using code NOMOREFIELDERS to get $25 in vouchers and $200 in deposit matching instantly. And I painstakingly put the link in the description for your convenience. I had to crack so many codes to get it down there, but it is there. Just click on it and you get $25 in vouchers and $200 in deposit matching. And as always, add me on the platform. I desperately need more friends. If you challenge me to a daily draft, I will probably accept it. All right, now back to the video. So let's dive into the top 3 of these trios, starting with a visit to an old group of friends. Hey y'all, before we start the segment, everybody who watches my channel knows that I struggle with pronunciation sometimes, especially when it comes to names, and while I was editing the segment, I realized I got Tony Lazzari's name wrong. I was pronouncing it Lazzari. I felt it was deeply disrespectful to the Italian community, and while I couldn't go back and re-record every time I said Tony Lazzari instead of Lazzari, I just dubbed it over, so hopefully it's not too distracting, but just want to give you all a heads up. You would think I'd have to regurgitate every single sentence I used in the Duos video for the 1927 Yankees, but they didn't have a third hitter eclipse the 145 OPS plus mark that year, even if they did have 3 come close. One of them was Tony Lazzari, whose career season came in 1929, adding to the bag of tricks the Yankees of the late 20s could use to crush the bodies and minds of their opposition. Except they didn't really do that this year. In fact, they missed the World Series for the first time in 4 seasons. What gives? Well, the Babe and Gehrig temporarily became human. Their longtime manager, Miller Huggins, contracted erysipelas and died at the season's end. A stampede occurred at Yankee Stadium in May, injuring 62 and killing 2 more. And their pitching staff imploded overnight, as most of them were suffering through the effects of alcoholism. All of this was occurring right before New York would become the epicenter for the largest global economic crash of all time. but let's not focus on all of that. First off, we should reacquaint ourselves with Gehrig and Ruth, because while both were good in 1929, the year marked a steep drop-off from the chandeliers of immortality they were both playing at. It's a natural human bias to ignore differences in quantity the higher numbers get. The difference between $7 and $53 seems a lot more significant than the difference between $252,639 and $252,685, even though it's the same. I tend to do this a lot more than I'd care to admit with baseball stats. That's why in the duos video, I made it a point to give more direct comparisons in order to highlight just how insanely good those seasons were. Now, I have the unfortunate task of demonstrating the significance of Ruth and Gehrig's drop-off. So, here I go. In 1927, Gehrig and Ruth combined for 402 weighted runs created, the most ever for two teammates. Just to put that number into perspective, the top 5 hitters on the 2023 Blue Jays, a team that was roughly league average at the plate, combined for 410 weighted runs created. Those 5 players barely eked out 8 more runs than 1927 Ruth and Gehrig. We'll get to the 5s video eventually, just hoping the Cardinals will get a feature on it. But think of how significant a boost to an offense Ruth and Gehrig were that season. In 1929, they combined for only 301 weighted runs created. This is like going from a duo of Ronald Acuna Jr. and Matt Olson to Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso. Not a bad duo either, but there is a clear separation between them. Even with the addition of Tony Lazzeri's career year, the Yankees' top 3 combined for 438 weighted runs created. Okay, I'm done talking about the 1927 Yankees and WRC. Let's go over the real star of the show, Tony Lazzeri, who was able to overcome epilepsy to settle in as the Aussie Albies of those late 20s Yankees teams. Never the star of the show, but the steady producer who silently kept the engine running. But in 1929, Lazzeri ascended to the heights of Gehrig and Ruth, even though he was still slightly a step behind our duo, who, as we said, had fallen back to earth. Lazzeri posted a 160 OPS plus, creating the Super Trio. This is like a band with Neil Peart on drums, Jimi Hendrix on guitar and vocals, and Les Claypool on bass. More than 1 out of 3 times, pitchers are giving up a run while facing just these 3 in a clean inning. Lazzeri also joined the increasingly rare group of players who slugged over 550 despite hitting less than 20 homers over a full season. A group that would continue to see less and less players before becoming extinct after 1988. Now, this is a strong intro for greatest trios of all time, but I've never been more excited in my life to talk about our next group. Finally, after all this time, I get to talk about Willie Mays. Inner Circle Hall of Famer, 2-time MVP, 24 All-Stars, 12 Gold Gloves, 660 career homers, 2,000 runs scored. I could go on. As someone who, very technically speaking, writes about baseball for a living, I arrive at points like this where I have an impossible task: to demonstrate how good Willie Mays was at baseball. It seems simple at first, but there's a fine line between just dangling his baseball reference page at you and spitting out accolades as I was doing earlier like it's a toy, or going too far into the deep end where I don't even know what point I'm trying to make. So I'm just going to pull out one fact and leave it there. Since integration, there have only been 29 seasons where a position player reached 10 wins above replacement. 20% of them were authored by Willie Mays. By 1963, he was in cruise control, in the middle of possibly one of the greatest 4-season runs we've ever seen. But enough of the say hey kid. We got 2 other guys to cover. Now, with an offense that saw platform seasons from 3 Hall of Famers with a fairly strong supporting cast, you'd think not only would they blow the doors down on opposing pitching that season, but they'd scratch at the gates of run-scoring immortality. So what if I told you that not only did they not lead MLB in runs scored that season, they finished in 3rd? How the hell can something like this happen? Well, first thing I did was look at the splits to see if this team struggled with runners on base. They did not. In fact, they hit a little bit better. I kept looking through situational splits and nothing was standing out. But that's when it hit me. I was looking in the wrong place. The 1963 Giants had something more powerful than a super trio. They had the anti-trio. Now, I had to do some extreme slicing here, but since the expansion era, 81 teams have had 3 or more players with an OPS plus of 85 or lower. The 1963 Giants were one of them. With this new information, I decided to run a new split, and there we have it. our smoking gun. The 1963 Giants got the 6th worst production of all time from their 7 through 9 compared to the rest of their order. This puts a hard cap on how many runs an offense can score when a third of it is an easy out. You can look at many games and see this play out in real time. Take August 5th against the Houston Colt 45s. The Giants are down 2-4 going into the top of the 8th. Willie McCovey hits a home run off of Don Notbart because, well, he's Willie McCovey, seeing the starter a 4th time through in a single game. Willie Mays singles immediately following because, well, he's Willie Mays, knocking the starter out of the game. Orlando Cepeda rudely welcomes all-star reliever Hal Woodchick with his first hit of the game because he's Orlando Cepeda and only went hitless in 27% of his games that year, setting the Giants up perfectly to not only tie the game, but to take the lead. After Harvey Kuhn reaches on an error, one of our tenacious 3 comes up and lays down a sacrifice bunt. It looks like he reaches safely even though no error was charged. Chalk it up to scorekeeping in the early 60s. The next 3 batters fail to score even a single runner. Capping it is none other than Chuck Hiller, who struck out to end the inning. Never would I have thought an anti-trio could coexist with a super trio, but this shows us how important lineup depth is. Even though pitchers had a 35% chance of giving up a run while battling through May-Covey-Peta, their offense was merely good overall because the back end could neither set them up or knock them down. Maybe great offensive trios aren't all they're chalked up to be. Oh my god. The first site that sticks out to me are the OPSs themselves. Because I wanted to incorporate league-wide factors into finding the best all-time trios, I used OPS Plus, which, while smarter, doesn't exactly speak to our primordial desire to look at big round numbers. There is something so simple, yet so powerful, about seeing a player one dot throughout an entire season. It activates that part of your brain that was formed when you saw your first home run, or when you listened to Nirvana for the first time. It brings you back to why you were so passionate about something in the first place. So seeing 3 players who are able to sustain that level of virtuosity over an entire season play for the same team is kinda like sensory overload for a baseball nerd like me. In fact, it's only been accomplished 3 other times, with this triad being the last to do it. The pure intimidation factor alone, seeing 3 hitters whose OPS started with a 1 had to cause pitchers in the National League that year to beg their manager to skip their turn in the rotation whenever the Cardinals came to town. All 3 fed off of each other, becoming one of only 14 trios in the modern era to collect at least 110 RBI while scoring 100 or more runs. This is what led to pitchers having a 42% likelihood of allowing a run while facing just these 3 during the 2004 season. Somehow, someway, these 3 were able to surpass trios that featured 4 Inner Circle Hall of Famers and 2 who were on the perimeter. So how did this benefit the 04 Cardinals as a team? Well, they put up the 2nd best slugging percentage in team history, which was single-handedly fueled by our big 3. Outside of Pujola Dumoulin, the Cardinals slugged .390 as a team. They brought their team slugging up by 70 points. Okay. Y'all know what I have to do now. That is around the same difference as 2023 Marcus Semien and Bryson Stott. And unlike our previous 2 trios, they were able to muscle their team to 105 wins, the most in franchise history for teams that didn't play during World War II. We all know the story from there. Even though it was a year before Pujols broke Lidge, all 3 players showed up during the series, almost mirroring their trifecta of 1-dotting from the regular season. Unfortunately, they all went cold during the World Series, becoming their own anti-trio. So after looking at arguably the 3 best trios of all time, how does the Dodgers Super Trio line up? Can they become the greatest of all time? First, let's ask ourselves what it could look like at every member's peak. Mookie Betts' career high OPS in a non-shortened season was 186 in 2018, Ohtani 184 last season, and Freeman's was 175. Also last season. God, this team is good. Oh god, this team is good. You average these bad boys together and you get 181, roughly 8 points higher than the 1929 Yankees Super Threesome. Keeping with the theme, even if you took each player's third best season, Mookie Betts' 2022, Freeman's 2016, and Ohtani's 2018, we are looking down the barrel of a combined 149 OPS plus. What I'm saying here is that not only can they do it, it's a virtual guarantee. These three are going to be in the same lineup until 2027, and all are somehow getting better. So let's look at their numbers as of the end of April. So Freddie obviously needs to learn how to hit homers again, but let's just say his OPS plus eventually eclipses 145. If you average Ohtani and Betts' current OPS plus with their last 3 seasons, which, again, I cannot emphasize just how unscientific this is, I would be making Andrew Wakefield so proud. These three would replace May Covey-Peda as my 3rd greatest trio of all time. To quote Shawnee from Dune Part 1, this is only the beginning. I'll be keeping close track of their vacuum run probability throughout the entire season, seeing if they could beat the mark set by the 2004 Cardinals. So if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel and follow me on Twitter, where I'll be posting most of the updates.